So in this second big idea video that pertains to our discussion on what is oral history, I want to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of oral history. But before I do that, I also want to hit on the fact that what oral history is a subset of a larger historical field, and that is the field of public history. And what we don't tell you guys sometimes, especially like at the undergraduate level, is that history is not just one big monolithic idea, right? Like people don't go to school just to learn, or don't go to grad school anyway, just to learn history. We specialize. And one of the specializations you can focus on in graduate school is the field of public history. And what public historians try to do is use the art of history, the research methods, the telling of stories, the practice of history itself, or teaching history, outside of the classroom. Public historians take this knowledge and take the history and take it out of the classroom in order to educate the public, hence public history. The goal is to, educate locally and to spread the knowledge of history to people who wouldn't normally go to a college classroom or spend time, in a library or something like that, reading history books. So public historians try to go out and unearth local history to make that history more relevant and make that history more available to the public. And one of the ways that public historians do that is through the use of oral histories. Again, the idea here is that we're going out and we're finding stories of people who don't normally get their story told, or who haven't had their story told in the grand scheme of things. It's easy to find books on important people, but it's harder to find historical research and stories based upon everyday life. And especially whenever you talk about local history as compared to like national history, sometimes local history kind of gets lost in the wash. So that's where public historians and oral historians kind of use their powers to do history outside of the classroom. Now, whenever we do oral histories to help us, find these stories, and we use those stories to tell history, they can have advantages and disadvantages. And we've talked about some of the advantages already of oral histories. The idea that they can seem more dramatic because they're coming from eyewitnesses. The idea that they have more power and they're more trustworthy because they're coming from the memory of somebody who saw what happened. That makes that history more, I guess for some people anyway, it makes it more authentic. And so oral histories have that kind of power. Me telling you a story about the past is not as good as someone who actually lived it, right? So that story is always going to be superior, hypothetically, to the story I can tell you about the same subject. Now, and there are a lot more advantages we can go through, but those are the ones I want you to kind of remember. But disadvantages, too, are, kind of part and parcel of historical research, oral histories especially. So, think about the different ways in which someone telling you a story could go wrong. What are some of the ways in which oral histories can kind of have their disadvantages? And it all has to do with how we remember the past. Some of it we can control, and some of it we can't control. Some of the things we can't control are issues like our memories fade over time. As we get older, things from the past kind of fade away. That's just part of human nature. So that's a huge problem for oral historians. Whenever you go talk to somebody who experienced something 50 years ago, you may not get the most accurate information all the time. It's not that they're trying to trick you, but it's that their memories just may not be good enough. And this, corresponds to other issues as well. Like we tend to kind of forget the things we don't want to remember, the bad stuff, but we remember the good stuff. And so sometimes our memories are kind of skewed by that, where we remember the good stuff and not the bad stuff. So sometimes, whenever we conduct oral histories, you may run into that kind of problem. Also, perspective. Our memory of an event is skewed by how we saw it. What were we doing at the time? Where were we? What were we thinking? All these different outside factors can influence how we remember something. And so you don't always get maybe the most accurate recollection of an event through an oral history, but what it lacks in accuracy, it makes up for in its immediacy. It makes up it makes up for with its ability to draw you in to a certain degree. And it's not to say that they're unreliable, but you just have to kind of remember that whenever you interview someone about the past, about a event in their lives, you may not always be getting the most crystal clear version. It's not wrong, but it might not be the most detailed that's possible. And one of the ways you can get around that is by interviewing more than one person about the same event. It's the same reason why the police interview more than one witness at a crime or an accident. You want to get different perspectives of the same thing so you can build a story, which is why whenever we do oral history interviews, we always interview more than one person about the same thing to get a well-rounded idea. So we get all of their thoughts, all of their memories, and we coalesce those to build the story. Now, sometimes people will just outright lie to you because they want to make themselves feel better. They want to tell a story where they're the hero. So that's also a problem with oral histories to a certain degree. It's not prevalent, but it does happen. Sometimes people, whenever you're talking to them, they want to tell you a good story. And if they think their story is kind of lame or boring, they may try to embellish it to make it seem more important so that they get your attention and get your interest. So that can happen on occasion as well. And sometimes people just, want to straight up just forget about the bad stuff in their lives. They'll give you a sense of a skewed past. You've heard of the term nostalgia before, probably, where we kind of, gloss over the bad stuff and only focus on the good stuff. I want to tell you about this part of what happened in this community 50 years ago, but I'm definitely not going to tell you about this other part because that's bad stuff. We don't want to bring that up. So I'm going to highlight this good stuff instead. So again, there's, some of the issues there. People can tell you what, not just what you want to hear, but what they want you to hear along the way. So there are some downsides to oral history, but for the most part, oral histories are very, very important sources of information. 9 times out of 10, no one's going to try to deliberately mislead you during an interview, an oral history interview. But that's, some of the highs and lows of the oral history process. And again, I don't say those to deter you because the positives far outweigh the negatives when it comes to these sorts of things. And whenever you record an oral history or have an oral history project put together, what you have is a story of the past that no one's ever really heard before. You're really breaking new ground whenever you conduct an oral history project, which is what you're all going to be doing in this class whenever you do your own oral histories as part of the 2 groups I've assigned. You're going to be breaking new ground whenever you do that.